Hey, Shalom. All praises unto Yahweh Shemi Al Shai. Double honors to the apostles of GMS. And honestly, brothers will be pushing his truth in sincerity throughout the four corners of the earth. All right. So we're gonna get into some information, some articles. Okay. You know, as we do out here at Great Millstone. Okay, we ain't out here to fill our own bellies with pride and other futile attempts to be something within this world and using the truth as the vehicle to achieve that. We're gonna keep this truth pumping, man. Okay. And with that said, I got this particular article right here in front of us right here, and this is dealing with China. Okay, right. This is dealing with China and other nations alike. As you can see, I've got four articles popped up before us right here. Okay, and the first of which is on Zero Hedge. This was posted on May 4th, and I think today is that May 4th. So that was posted today. And it's got some stuff that lead to some interesting interesting consequences that have been World War III. Okay, because we all know what happens when you ditch the dollar, man. Okay, when you ditch the dollar, you get sanctions imposed on you. Okay, you get your country gets bombed the hell out of. But what happens when America puts sanctions on Russia? What happens when America puts sanctions on China? Okay, some very interesting things happen as pertaining to biblical specter, because it is going to be a glorious specter, right? A glorious spectacle when Babylon, America, is destroyed. Okay, the people of the Most High is removed from this position of, or rather more this position that we're in right now. Okay, and put into a position of esteem. Okay, so that's what we work hard fervently for here at GMS. Okay, all right, not for no worldly accolades, but rather the glory of the kingdom. Okay, so with that, let's get into this. So it says here, China plans to subvert the global dollar standard. Okay, it ain't the first time we've heard about this, but hey, let's reinforce the standard that's been set forth as pertaining to countries leaving the dollar, countries moving to other currencies, and ultimately we know this is just a big chess game that the elite banking families are playing. As a result, you're gonna have the mark of the beast coming out of this. Okay, so let's get into it. So it says, if nothing else, the Chinese have a sense of history and destiny. Okay, they have had a glorious past stretching back millennia, and once controlled most of most of the Asian heartland in the days of Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan. Okay, you can check that out on a Netflix TV what is it? It's a documentary type program that they do called Marco Polo, which it's not actual factual, but you can see certainly that China and other Asian empires out there, and they had some rather illustrious dynasties. Okay, she says, but even then, China was essentially inward looking. Okay, protecting her own cultural values. Trade with the Europeans in the centuries following Marco Polo's visit, mostly behest of European travelers, not the Chinese. She exported her art and culture to visitors and did not import European values. Okay, it says this was a mistake implicitly recognized by China's current leadership. Right, this time China has embraced Western thinking and technology to further her own progress. The development of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in recent years is the platform for China in partnership with Russia to embrace the Asian continent through peaceful trade. I like the fact that they put that in there, because really when you're trading with America, that ain't peaceful trade. Okay, let's paint a picture with words here as with reference to America unpeaceably trading with these different nations. Now I always like to quote this example. Okay, so you have a country like Brazil Colombia, etc., etc. That's cocoa beans, okay, or coffee, okay, whatever commodity that it is that they're selling, that's their shit. That's what they sell, okay. So you got this country and they trade this with other countries. Now here's what America does, okay. America goes up there, all right, whatever company is Starbucks, whatever, wherever they, say we're gonna buy this product for this price, okay. Now if the party that's selling, okay, Brazil, Colombia, whatever, is not happy with the price, with the American way of doing things is that they go to another place where they produce exactly the same thing and offer them the likewise deal or lesser deal. Okay, so the initial individual is forced to drive the price right down. That's why victuals are so good cheap within America, because they have a thing of forcing down the prices of these different nations. In other words, these nations are in subordinate positions. Okay, now that leads us to a thing where it's spoken about within the book of Genesis 27th chapter, Genesis the 20, well, really throughout the whole scripture, right, where it talks about how Jacob was going to be the ruler of the whole entire world. Okay, he was going to have slaves, subjects. Okay, all right, and that's a very necessary thing for you to have your coffee being so cheap and readily accessible. Someone has to be in slavery for that. For you to have your cocoa plants, all right, your cocoa butter, okay, your milk, okay, your clothes, so easily accessible and cheaply accessible, somebody has to be in slavery. Okay, so now they got it to a, they call it in modern day terms, you got a thing of what's called as child labor. Okay, so you got child labor within these different countries, and they say, oh, that's terrible, that's bad. Well, let's go to the root of the matter. You're buying all of these cheap clothes. Okay, you got food easily accessible. That's the end all be all. That's the result of somebody being in slavery. And it's not going to be a different thing when the Messiah sets up our kingdom. The only things that's going to be different, it ain't going to be our brothers and sisters out there within Colombia, Cuba, Brazil, within Western Africa, and etc., in hardcore servitude underneath the so-called white man. Okay, so he can produce his produce, right? The fatness of the earth. It ain't going to be that. What it is going to be is going to be these different nations. It's going to be Esau himself, okay, up until the point he gets destroyed. It's going to be these different nations that are going to be in that position of servitude, all right? So let's move on with this. So that's a form of Esau, all right, messing you up. Now, when you go into the greater, the more expounded version of that, you got trade wars, sanctions, okay, currency wars, all of these different things, just to make sure the price that you're offering the American government, the American people, Babylon, is what they want it to be. So you can't drive up your price and say, look, we want to sell you this for this price so our economy could do better. No, they ain't gonna do that. So now you got it to where these countries are saying, look, this is unpeaceable. Let's do trade that's fair, just, and peaceable within ourselves. And so therefore they're setting up these different pacts like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I've touched on this a little bit earlier. I touched on this in some other videos that I've done in the past. So let's just go through this quickly. So it says the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or Shanghai Pact, is a Eurasian political, economic, and military organization which was founded in 2001 in Shanghai by leaders of China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Right, these countries, except Uzbekistan, had been members of the Shanghai Five, founded in 1996. And after the inclusion of Uzbekistan in 2011, the members renamed the organization, right, on July the 10th, 2015. So what you're seeing now is a situation where you have a buildup of nations, stone cold against NATO, against the United States. Okay, you can say you got to India and Pakistan signed the memorandum of the obligations on the 25th of June 2016. So these are all countries, all entities that are stone cold against the American way of doing things. Now this is, you could say it's artificially by way of the Rothschilds, whatever. the end all be all is gonna be the same. Esau's gonna have it to where these nations gonna come up against each other and they're gonna fight. But ultimately, the Most High is gonna step in and he's gonna set up his new world order as pursuant to the book of Daniel, the second chapter on the 44th verse, wherewith it is said, the Most High shall set up in these days shall the Most High set up in the days of these kings shall the Most High set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed and it shall never be left to other people. Okay, so let's move on now. In fact, I wanted to touch on this real quick, okay, because this ain't just a thing of financially aiding one another within these different countries. This Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is also a thing of these countries helping each other militarily. Okay, so let's just read this right quick. So it says, Shanghai Cooperation Organization starts first ever military exercises in Kyrgyzstan. Okay. So a Shanghai Cooperation Organization is conducting its first joint military exercise in Kyrgyzstan just weeks after a suicide bomber attacked the Chinese embassy, etc., 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 etc. Okay, so you can read that for yourself. Let's go back onto this article right here, and then we'll finish off in countries ditching the dollar in a second. Real quick video, okay, just hitting the main points. You can read the rest for yourself. You know, this information is readily available. So it says China's approach is fundamentally different from that of America, under which President Trump appears to be envious of the success of non-Americans producing goods and services for the American consumer, etc., etc. So let's go to this one. It says already China dominates the world trade. Her own economy is already significantly larger than the United States on the purchasing power parity estimates. While being the largest consumer of raw material, China also exports more finished goods by value than any other country. As the Asian powerhouse, she has lifted the economies of all the countries of the western side of the Pacific, which including her own, being between them have a GDP of 50 trillion. Her exports into Asia now exceed her exports into the US, right? So you had a situation where the United States was the main driving force to the Chinese, the success in the Chinese market. Now they're having it to where they can go into these other different countries, which when the time comes, it's going to be within that block of nations as we just mentioned over there, and they're going to be wanting to prosper amidst themselves. In other words, dividing up, divvying up away from the from America. Now let's go into this, because we all know what happens. See, you ain't gonna have it to where the United States is just gonna let you just leave the dollar like that. Okay, and you take away all of the prosperity that's out there within America. That ain't gonna happen. Why do you think they got battleships out there within right on the doorsteps of Russia, right on the doorsteps of China, man? This whole thing is systematic, right? So China, rather more ditching the dollar, right? It says one of the symptoms of a declining empire is that it becomes less and less productive, and therefore less and less relevant to other countries. All right, so you had it to where America was prosperous. You know, you read the book of Obadiah, the first chapter. It says, when you're gonna reach the peak of your productivity, you're just gonna send them some ships out there into the skies. Well, they reached that point. Now you have a decline in their productivity. Okay, so they're letting you know right there, this is the empire. They've reached their peak. Now they're going down, man. All right, and they're becoming less and less relevant to these different countries. We ain't dealing with the dollar, man. That's done. That's yesterday. We're trying to invest. See, when you're into business, you're looking at the different ways you can make money, not today, but in the future. Okay, when you're in the top, you see, you got Jay to go out into these different jobs and they work for Esau, okay, and they're on a lower tier of doing things, but they walk around, they got the pride, but they don't really understand how the business side of things work. When you are right out there on the top end of the scale, you're thinking about, how is this move gonna affect me in 5 years time, 10 years time? Lord's will, there ain't no 5 months from here, man. Okay, but you're thinking about how these things are gonna affect you in the long run. So when they're dealing with America, when they're dealing with the dollar, they're thinking, look, in the long run, we're gonna lose with the dollar. So let's move our funds over here. right? Let's trade outside of the dollar. In the future, really, we're gonna be in a more peaceable way of trading. But see, that's all systematically done so that when the American government sees that they got a reason to go out there to war with these countries, they're gonna incur and they're gonna go into a World War III. And also, you're gonna have it to where the chips gonna come out of that. All of these different times is gonna come out of that. The time of Jacob's trouble, the hour of temptation, all of them things is gonna spew out from these countries simply saying we don't want to deal with the dollar anymore. Okay, and we want to do our own thing between our own people, and the American government ain't gonna allow that. Okay, and so let's move on. It says any empire whilst is still in its prime will have a strong currency. You saw the same thing with Rome. As its productive relevance declines, so will its currency. Invariably, its leaders attempt to keep the currency strong, right? By way of what? Trade wars, sanctions, okay? Air raids, all right? Rolling up on a person's country and bombing the hell out of them. That's how America stayed relevant for so long. In fact, when you look at I think one of the most, I think it's 80% of the American economy is predicated off of military cells. So things dealing with gun manufacturing, bomb manufacturing, tanker manufacturing, right? So that's how you know it's Esau, because we know that Esau was going to live by the sword. And he saw it selling all of these different technologies in terms of war to its so-called sister states, which are in NATO, etc., etc. All right, them that she's made a pact with. So it says, and it reads on. It says, invariably, its leaders attempt to keep the currency strong by way, like I said, by way of trade wars, currency wars, sanctions, etc., 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 real wars, hot wars. In spite of the decline in spite of the decline in national relevance, rather than a return to a more productive condition, the empire also invariably resorts to force. Okay? The nation resorts to force. And that's where it becomes so sweet for the men of the Lord, because now you're going to resort to force. You're going to come out there with your World War III, because everybody's saying we ain't dealing with the dollar anymore. We ain't going out with this, that, and the third. And the Most High is going to set us up. Just like how you had it to where in the prior time you had the Romans. They became less relevant. Their currency became weak. They tried to set up all of these different ways by way of force to become relevant again. And the Most High had it to where you had the Byzantine Empire spew out. Well, now you're going to have the righteous equivalent of that within this generation, where with the Most High is going to set up the Negroes, Hispanics, Native Americans, the Israelites scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, and they're going to be on thrones, and we're going to be rulership. We're going to be in rulership rather more, but this time we're going to be ruling in righteousness. So therefore, we can't be unrelevant anymore. Because see, the ultimate thing about productivity is about righteousness. So if your productivity is spewing off of righteousness, for instance, keeping the land Sabbath. Okay, if you're keeping the land Sabbath, guess what? The product you're going to be producing, all right, on that land, right? Your apples, okay, your wine, so your grapes, so you can make your sweet red wine, okay, right? The very grass that your cows are grazing on is going to be persistently productive, because you're allowing that land to rest. But see, Esau and all of these different nations, they don't follow the law, statutes, commandments of the Most High, so they become unproductive over time. Okay, and that's just a small example. You apply that in terms of wickedness, in terms of the Most High being on your side when you go out there to war against the nations. Well, if you've been a wicked nation, the Most High gonna have it to where you lose. That's how we came out of that's why we became irrelevant. We became so irrelevant. We work for our enemies right now. But see, the Most High is restoring balance up in the world, and we're going to be persistently relevant when we are ruling, and we're going to be ruling by way of the law, statutes, commandments of the Most High listed within the scriptures. So it says here, the U.S. has been unusually forceful in this regards in order to retain the dollar as the currency upon which oil is dominated and paid for. Denominated and paid for more. It says the U.S. has attacked countries, Iraq, all right, and that's important. They ain't quite attacked Iraq, but they want to. Oh no, sorry, Iraq. I'm thinking Iran. They've attacked Iraq, all right, Libya, when their leaders have announced that they will in the future accept their other currencies or gold as payment for oil. The U.S. also attempted to retain the U.S. also attempted to retain the dollar as the default currency of the world by applying sanctions, right? The refusal to allow the use of SWIFT system, and then the the algorithm brothers, they were getting into that. All right, shout out to them brothers out there. Brothers be doing very beautiful, very edifying lessons right now. That's how we know we're at the end, because the scripture talks about how what that the Lord shall increase a lot of times. So the Most High is putting forth that spirit for brothers to get into these things, man. Okay, so they was getting into the swift way of a system. I forget the ins and outs of it, but you can see that the United States refused the swift payment system, and all of these systems are all based off of Esau's America's technology. So when America wants to say, look, that's it, no more. That's how you know it's all orchestrated, man. Okay. She says lowering oil prices, demanding that that its allies cease to trade with offending countries. This approach to resolving the warning strength of a currency rarely works, and in the case of the U.S. has failed spectacularly. For hundreds of years, Russia and China have been less than friends, and even when they are getting along, have always remained suspicious of one another. However, the measures imposed by the United States have caused them to join forces out of mutual interest, and they have both built up their own gold reserves and are in the process of laying their own transatlantic cable to allow independent world communications, and creating their own SWIFT system, right? the double eagle project, which, hey, I'm gonna have to get into that. All right, I'm gonna have to get into that a different day. If our brothers haven't already did that already. So it says that I recently linked largest energy deal the world's ever witnessed to be paid in rubles and in yuan. Okay, so I mean, you can read the rest of that for yourself if you wish to. But the point, pretty much, I like that beyond Swift. Okay, but the point is pretty much made. So with that, I'm gonna say all praises unto Yahweh Shemi Shai. Okay, double honors to the apostles of GMS, on the brothers that be pushing this truth and sincerity. And Yahweh Shemi Shai. Right, I'm gonna see you on the next one. Shalom.